In 1845, the Franklin expedition left England and sailed west across the North Atlantic Ocean, past Greenland, and into the islands of northern Canada around the Arctic Circle. What they were trying to do was they were trying to find what they theorized existed, which was called the Northwest Passage. And that was a way to get from Europe to Asia by going north and then across the top of Canada and then through the top of the Pacific Ocean and then down into Asia. And a lot of people had theorized that there was a way to sail that way, but nobody had ever done it before. And they didn't have airplanes or satellite imagery, and so they didn't know at all about what the land looked like north of the Arctic Circle. They didn't know anything about ice conditions or if it was even possible to sail. And so a lot of different British explorers and European explorers went into that region looking for a trade route that would get them to Asia through northern Canada. And the Franklin expedition was led by a guy named Franklin, and things went bad for them pretty quickly. Their boat was really complicated, and it had a very complicated system of heating. They had like this steam engine that heated the entire ship, and they had really fancy instruments inside the ship, and they had fancy silverware and fancy plates and fancy cups and fancy spoons and serving material, and all of it was designed to make these English gentlemen who were these explorers looking for this Northwest Passage feel like they were taking their civilized English life with them as they explored the Arctic. And the Inuit people who actually lived there said, "You guys are nuts. This boat is not going to make it through the ice, and you guys are eating the wrong food. You guys are carrying the wrong equipment. You're not taking this seriously. The land up here and the ice up here can kill you if you don't take it seriously." And these British people said, "Oh, those uncivilized savages don't know what they're talking about. We're going to conquer the Arctic Circle with science and with the power of our civilization." And their ship got frozen into a patch of ice almost immediately, and then they got stuck. And then they had to abandon their ship, and then they had to try to escape across the ice without dog sleds and without fur coats and without any of the things that the Inuit people used to actually survive up there. And it was a huge disaster, and most of them died. Later on, other explorers went into the Arctic to try to find what had happened to the Franklin expedition, and they found all these places where the people from the Franklin expedition had left the ship and gone to different islands and different areas and tried to set up camp. And what they found on these people when they actually listened to the Inuit people and went to the places where they camped, and also the Inuit people, brought some of these artifacts back, what they found was when they'd left the ship, a lot of these sailors and a lot of these officers had gone and taken their family silver with them. So they had spoons and forks made out of silver with a little crest on the fork or the spoon that was their family crest. And one of the things that's really bothered people since then, since they found these people with their spoons and forks, is you're trying to survive in the Arctic, right? And your ship is gone and you don't know where you are, and temperatures are terrible and everything is ice, and you're starving to death because all the canned food you brought spoiled, and you have to leave your ship and try to find this new place to stay, hoping that maybe someday someone will come rescue you and hoping that you can survive until then. And what do you take with you? You take silverware and plates and cups because you're a fancy English gentleman, and you need to carry that civilization and that sense of honor and of chivalry with you wherever you go. And so, like, the spoon in your pocket or the spoon in your pack is literally weighing you down and keeping you from traveling as fast as you need to travel. But you're not just carrying silverware. You're carrying this whole idea that I am a white man and I will conquer this area through my advanced knowledge and through my civilized behavior. And you're carrying all that burden of your entire race and your entire country with you. And in the end, it killed these people because they were arrogant and they didn't listen to what the Inuit people were teaching them. And they had this big burden that they were carrying that ended up being too heavy, that it was this big metaphorical abstract burden, but it actually sank their ship. Now, let's compare that. This is a weird comparison, Let's compare that to Genghis Khan and the Mongols, who took over all of Asia in the 13th and 14th centuries. Now, they were what's called light cavalry. And that means that they were horseback soldiers, and it meant that they didn't carry a lot of stuff with them. The Mongols wore leather armor. They didn't even wear metal armor. They wore leather armor, and they wore silk shirts under their armor so that if they got shot with an arrow, the silk fibers would bind to the arrow and they could pull the arrow out easily and keep going. These guys knew how to, as they were riding, they knew how to lean over the side of their horse and go to the bathroom and get back on the horse without stopping as they were on a march. They didn't take food with them except for a little bit of dried meat, and they hunted and raided for the food that they needed as they went, and they didn't take any food for their horses either. All they had to do was find these big pasture lands up in the steppes of Asia so that their horses could eat. And the reason they were so fearsome as an enemy was they didn't need much. They could ride so quickly and so far and so fast and strike you where you never thought they would strike because they were light infantry. They didn't need anything. They just lived off the land and they just did what they needed to do. Another good way to think about the Mongols, or another thing that was important for their conquest of Asia, was that every single infantry or every single cavalry rider knew what the goal was. So their officers would get them all together before they'd do a ride, and they'd say, if I get killed, our goal is we're going to take over this region. And so even if I get killed, I'm not going to micromanage you. You guys know what the goal is. When you get there, I need you to just do it. And so they had decentralized command. They weren't all looking to one guy who was going to tell them what to do. Every single rider knew exactly what the goal was, and every single rider knew that it was their responsibility to fulfill that goal. And that's why the Mongols were so successful. They didn't need anything. They didn't carry anything. They were just light, and they just rode over the ground of Asia, and they just took over, and every single rider knew exactly what the mission was and what they were supposed to be doing. If you compare that to the armies that they fought against, or like a really heavy army with a lot of logistics, you have to move the troops into an area where you're going to defend, and then you have to feed those troops, so you have to bring in cooks. And then the cooks need something to cook, so you have to bring in all the supplies. Then you have to feed the people who are bringing in the supplies. And then you need storehouses and a permanent camp in order to protect all of that stuff. And then you need probably other soldiers to protect the supply chain, because if your supply chain gets cut off, then your infantrymen will starve. And so it's this big, slow, cumbersome operation where you're going and you're building this supply chain in order to defend a certain territory. And the Mongols didn't have any of that. They just lived off the land, and they went where they went, and they did it fast. And that was why they were so successful. So, ideas can be heavy. Silverware can be heavy. Trying to feed your troops can be something that's heavy. Your command structure can be heavy. And that brings us to us. We are all carrying heavy things in our lives that keep us from becoming who we're supposed to be and keep us from doing what God wants us to do. One of the things that we carry that's heavy is our expectations for ourselves. So you say, when we're 18, the classic thing that we ask all these graduates that are graduating right now, what's your goal? What's your plan? What's your purpose in life? What's your mission? As if an 18-year-old can figure that out, right? And they say, well, I want to be a thoracic surgeon. Great. What happens when they go to college and they struggle through pre-med and they realize that this is not what I thought it was, and it's not actually what I wanted for myself? Well, then they're stuck, because they set this goal and they told everybody when they were graduating what their goal was for themselves, and then they get into it and they realize they don't really like it. And maybe they want to do something simpler. Maybe they want to do like auto tech, or they want to be a nurse, or they want to be a dental hygienist, or something that's not as prestigious in the minds of other people as a thoracic surgeon. Now they have to say, man, do I really want to go through the embarrassment of telling everybody that the career path that I picked for myself, the career path that other people wanted for me, is really not what's right for my life? And that has led a lot of the young people that I know to just sort of struggle instead of making a decision that they needed to make a long time ago. They struggled through an extra couple years of school. They end up paying for an extra couple years of school as they're struggling because that idea of who they're supposed to be is so heavy on them. And when we have those expectations for ourselves, you know, like one day I want to own a 6-bedroom house and have a 10-car garage and have 18 kids and run a $15 million a year business, and I'm not going to be happy until I achieve that goal. Well, sometimes those goals that we set for ourselves are so heavy that they don't allow us to adapt to the situation of life that we're actually in when new scenarios come up and new circumstances come up. We also carry the fear of trouble and the fear of loss. A lot of people, look, this is not a judgment on you if you have a storage unit. I get it. But one of the biggest growing industries in the United States are those storage units like over there where people rent an extra garage for all of their stuff. And a lot of times we don't end up using that stuff ever again. But the reason we keep it instead of turning into cash is we think, oh, one day I'm going to need this. I have a garage full of tools, and some of those tools I'm probably not ever going to use again because they were for specific jobs that hopefully I'll never have to do again. But do I sell them or do I give them away? No, I keep them. Why? Because I'm afraid that if I get rid of it, then someday I'm going to need to buy it again, right? And that's just kind of how we all go through life. So we're literally carrying stuff. A lot of the older people who have passed away, my grandparents, when they pass away, you start to go through their stuff and you realize, whoa, they packed this garage full of stuff that they really were never going to use. And a lot of the last years of their life was all about managing the things that they owned and moving things around and storing things. And it took up a lot of their attention. It took a lot of their time, and it took a lot of their money to kind of manage their possessions, when really we don't need that much on a day-to-day basis to live and to live well. But we're afraid that if we get rid of our stuff, someday we're going to need to buy it again, and we're scared that we won't be able to pay that cost. On a personal level, a lot of us carry past trauma. A lot of us have things that were said to us or things that happened to us when we were little. Maybe that parent that wasn't there for you the way that you needed them to be. Maybe that brother or sister that was too critical. Maybe worse than that. And as you get up, as you grow up and as you get older, you feel like you're never going to be able to achieve your goals or do what you know you need to do because you've got this stuff in your past that you feel is holding you back. And I know it's not as easy as just saying, well, I'm going to let go of all that stuff and just sort of start over fresh. I know a lot of people try to do that, and I know it's not that easy. But we do have to recognize that as a burden that we do carry. Things that people said, things that people did to us in the past that traumatized us can have a huge effect on us in the future, because every decision we make and every goal that we set and everything we try to do, you know, casts a shadow. Those things that happen to us cast a shadow on the things that we want to do as we move forward. We also carry the expectations of our tribe. So, you know, in Christian culture, for example, marriage is supposed to be a certain thing. Family is supposed to be a certain thing. We're supposed to raise our kids a certain way. We're supposed to earn an income a certain way. We're supposed to deal with life a certain way. And sometimes when we hit a wall as we get older and those things don't work for us the way that they maybe work for everybody else, it can be hard to adapt to those new situations because we've got the voices of everybody in our tribe in our heads all the time telling us the way that things are supposed to be. But you might reach some situation in your life with maybe a child or with a relationship or with your idea of yourself, and you might go, man, the way that everybody told me to think about this does not work anymore. And it's hard to let go of that burden, and it's hard to free yourself up, and it's hard to adapt, and it's hard to move forward. One of the things that we carry is a sense of all the effort that we put into something in the past. So you might have a relationship in your life that you really need to give up on. There might be a person that's been a drain on you, and you've given them everything that you could possibly give, and it's not going anywhere. And you might say, man, I really just need to pull back from this a little bit and set a better boundary. Or if it's a business, You might have invested years of your life into something, or maybe a education path in school. You might know that it's not right for you, but you might already be 3, 4, 5 years in, and you might say, man, if I don't keep going, then all this work that I've done and all this effort that I've made is lost. And that's called the sunk cost fallacy. Because, if it's a bad investment and you keep adding to it or you keep hanging on to it, it's not going to get better. You're just going to be tied to it for more time. But a lot of times we carry that effort that we've made and that idea, like, I'm so invested in this, I can't let it go. Because it means that all my work was for nothing. All my work with that person, all my work with this business, all my work with this investment, it was all for nothing. So I can't let it go. And that keeps us tied to things that we don't need to be tied to. And it keeps us from moving forward and from being free to adapt. A lot of times we carry the pessimism of other people. If you grew up with somebody telling you, who do you think you are? You're gonna go to college? You're gonna be some smarty pants? Who do you think you are? You're gonna have a good family? Where you come from? Who do you think you are? You're gonna be some spiritual person? I know your past. And when we carry those things with us, it keeps us from expressing ourselves and moving forward and doing the things that we know we need to do. You're gonna be a writer? You're gonna be a musician? You're gonna be a painter? You're gonna be a songwriter? You're going to be a doctor? Pfft. So many people try to do that and they never get there. What makes you think you're special? And that voice in our head keeps us from being who we're supposed to be. It's a heavy burden that we carry with us as we move forward. There's also another thing that really gets organizations, that we carry as organizations. It's that mission creep. And that's the idea, like, all right, let's say as a church, our goal is to reach the community of McAllen with the gospel of Jesus Christ. What do we need to do that? Well, we need training and we need to get together. We need to meet and we need help and support. Okay, so we're going to get a building and we're going to get a pastor and we're going to have all these programs and we're going to have all these committees. And now all of a sudden, 5, 10, 20 years later, our goal is to maintain this structure that we've built, and we've forgotten what our original goal was. That happens in business, it happens in families, it happens with churches. You get so tied to the way that you're doing something or the resources that you need in order to accomplish your goal that you forget what the goal was in the first place, and it becomes about protecting what you've built. I have a friend, Raymond. I've talked about him in a service before. He's a barber now. And he told me on Wednesday that a question he's been asking his clients, the people that, while he's cutting their hair, he goes, okay, if money was no object for you, what would you do today? And he said people go, well, I'd go home and take a nap. Really? You'd go home and take a nap? Yeah, that's your big plan? Yeah. Okay. And then what would you do tomorrow? I'd probably go to the island and I'd go fishing. Okay. What would you do the day after that? He goes, well, I'd spend time with my kids. The day after that, oh man, we'd have a cookout and a barbecue and I'd invite everybody over. And Raymond said, probably dozens of people he's asked this question and it's always the same kind of answer. I'd take some time to relax and I'd spend some time with my family. And Raymond said, he tells all these people one by one, you don't need a lot of money to do that. You can go fishing tomorrow. The island's right there. You can go home and take a nap right now. How much money do you need to take a nap? 0. You drove here in a car. Put that seat back and close your eyes and you're in Nap City, right? You don't need money to spend time with your kids. They're there all the time. And what he said as he was talking to these people was that it was like a light bulb moment for each person. Because we think that the things we want to do in life, like spend time with our kids, have a cookout, go fishing. Is she all right? Okay, she's okay. Yeah? All right. We had, for those of you watching at home, we had a toddler accident over there. Oh. We think that these things that we want to do, we have to earn them somehow. And we have to earn them by fulfilling all of the goals that we have before we can give ourselves permission to do the things that we want to do. But really, the things that we want to do, we don't need to earn them. We don't need permission. They're right there. To have a good day and to have a good attitude and to spend time with your kids and, to enjoy the company of other people and to do those things that you want to do, those things that feed your soul. Most of them are not expensive. Most of them do not cost a lot of money. Most of them are right there if we can just slow down enough to do them. And so all of these things are burdens that we carry that keep us from being focused. They keep us from being successful. They keep us from being content. And they keep us from being ourselves. There's an answer to this in the Bible. And the answer is to travel light. To travel light. Go to Exodus chapter 12, verse 37. Exodus chapter 12, verse 37. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides children. A mixed crowd also went up with them, and livestock in great numbers, both flocks and herds. They baked unleavened cakes of the dough that they had brought out of Egypt. It was not leavened because they were driven out of Egypt and could not wait, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves. So every year at Passover, the Jewish people get together and they eat unleavened bread for an entire week. They go through their house, they get rid of all the yeast and all of the rising agents for their bread, and they eat flat bread that's cooked hard for an entire week every spring since like the year 1400 BC. Why are they doing that? They're doing that because they were slaves in Egypt. And when God sent Moses to rescue them, the last plague that God sent on Egypt, God said to Moses, warn the people that when it's time to go, it's time to go. And they don't have time to bake yeasty bread and to let it rise, and they don't have time to cook a lot of food, and they don't have time to get ready for the journey. Have them put on their shoes and have them bake some flatbread, and then we're going to go out into the desert, and I'm going to provide for you from there. And it was a real test of faith for these people, for the Hebrew people, because they had to think about this journey of leaving the nation where they were slaves, but going somewhere new and starting a new nation with nothing. And God was telling them to travel light as they went. Because if they stuck around and tried to get ready for the trip and all that, they were going to miss their moment when they would be free and when they could actually leave and when they could escape. 600,000 people plus children, that's a lot of people to move. And the only way you're going to move that many people is if you're not carrying a lot of heavy stuff with you as you go. In the New Testament, Jesus says something pretty similar to his disciples. Go to Matthew chapter 10, verse 5. It says, these 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions. Go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. As you go, proclaim the good news. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. You received without payment, give without payment. Take no gold or silver or copper in your belts, no bag for your journey, or 2 tunics or sandals or a staff, for laborers deserve their food. Whatever town or village you enter, find out who in it is worthy, and stay with them until you leave. As you enter the house, greet it. If the house is worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, shake off the dust from your feet as you leave that house or town. So Jesus' mission for his disciples is, I don't want you guys to have to fundraise here or get a bunch of stuff together or organize. You don't even need extra shoes. You don't need an extra cloak. You don't need money, and you don't need even a walking stick. Just go and do what I told you to do. And if it doesn't work out in the place where you're at, shake the dust off and keep moving. And if it does work out, stay there and do the work, because there God will take care of your needs. And that's what it means to travel light. Traveling light is freedom. It's the freedom to respond to new situations. It's the freedom to adapt. It's the freedom to live in joy. And traveling light means that we will trust that God will provide for our needs if we just do what we know we're supposed to do. It's the trust that there will be a road, there will be a way, there will be provision for you if we do what God wants us to do. We don't have to make it complicated. We don't have to make it heavy. We don't have to build an entire system of support just to do what we've been asked to do, just to be who we're supposed to be. We can just do it. We can be free to just do it. Now, let's talk about this in our day-to-day lives and in the way that this actually affects us. So to travel light requires that we're self-aware enough to know about the burdens that we're carrying with us. We need to be able to look at ourselves clearly enough and honestly enough and say, these are the things in my past, and these are the ideas, and these are the desires that I have for myself that are weighing me down and keeping me from adapting. A lot of people don't want to do that because those burdens were maybe given to us by our parents or by our religious community or even by our own sense of who we're supposed to be. And we don't want to take a look at those things because we don't want to let them go. Because it's like, man, if I'm not that person that's always pushing for that thing that I've been pushing for since I was 18 years old, then who am I? Because my identity is all tied up in that. And a lot of us don't want to be that self-aware. We don't want to take ourselves apart. We don't want to untangle all those threads and really admit these things are holding me back. So the first step is we have to be aware of ourselves and know what's holding us down and what's heavy and what's holding us back. The next thing, and this is hard, we have to give ourselves permission to let those things go. Nobody is going to give you permission to drop your burdens except for you. Let's say your burdens come from a parent or from a religious community. Those people are not going to tell you, hey, all those things I told you when you were little, you don't have to listen to any of that anymore. You're free. That moment never comes. You have to be the person to say, I am going to let these things go and I am going to live free. Because nobody else is going to do it for you. The third thing that we need to do in order to live light is we have to trust ourselves that we really do know the right thing to do in these situations. And trust God that he'll provide for us if we do the right thing enough that we'll just do the right thing and deal with the consequences when they come up. I am subject to this, and everybody I know is subject to this. We get this idea, this is the right way to do this. This is the right place that we should be investing our energy and our effort. This is the right way to move. And then we sit down and we talk about it with other people, and people go, yeah, but what about this? And what will this person think? And do we really have enough in order to do this? And what happens if people say this? And we just start kind of piling all that stuff on. And if we listen to those voices and we don't actually do the thing that we know that we're supposed to do, it just means that we don't trust ourselves enough to pick a direction and go for it. It means like we feel like we need to carry our family spoons with us out onto the ice because what'll happen if we make it back to England and we lost our family silverware? Which is insane. Because it's that attitude that got these people killed, right? But they were worried like, oh man, what will my wife think if I come home without our spoons? You're going to die on the ice. Leave the spoons, right? Take a knife. Ask the Inuit for help. They were actually willing to help. Ask them to teach you how to kill a seal. You'll be fine without the spoons. You have to trust that you'll be fine without the spoons. And then the last thing is we have to keep a clear objective in mind. We have to know where we're going and we have to know why. And if you don't have a clear objective for yourself, people will come along and pile on their burdens onto you and tell you what they think you should be doing. And since you don't have a clear direction for yourself, you go, yeah, I guess I should probably do that. And we just sort of absorb everybody's burdens, and we absorb the expectations of our community, and we absorb social pressure. And then it's impossible to move forward. So keep those four things in mind. Number one, we got to be self-aware. Number two, we have to give ourselves permission to let go of the things that weigh us down. Number three, we have to trust that we actually know the right thing to do. And number four, we have to keep a clear objective in mind. Let's talk about marriage. So one of the main things we talk about when I do premarital counseling with a couple that's going to get married is breaking free from the expectations of their family or the way that their family always did things in order to build the kind of marriage that they want to have. I know people who have been very strong when it comes to physical discipline with their kids, to the point where they're actually hurting their kids. And we ask them why they're doing it. They say, well, this is the way my parents raised me, and I'm fine. Well, no, you're not fine. You're hitting your kid. And a lot of people aren't aware that the people who raised us were just human beings like us, and that there's nothing wrong or dishonoring when it comes to our parents to take a look at how their relationship worked and how they raised their kids and say, you know what? Maybe we can do better on a couple of these areas. In fact, a good parent, a good father, a good mother will say, I want you to do better than I did. I want your relationship to be healthier than mine was. I want you to raise your kids in a healthier way than I raised you. Go out there, do better than me. That's, for a good parent, that's the dream, right? That our kids grow up healthier and stronger and wiser than we were. A bad parent says, I did the best that I could, and if you think you're going to do better, then you're nuts, because this is just the way the world is. And you have to look at that voice in your life, and you have to say, nope. I'm thankful to my mom and my dad for everything that they gave to me and the way that they raised me and the fact that they did the best that they knew how to do. But I'm going to try to do better, to honor them and for the good of my relationship and for the good of my kids. And a good parent will encourage you in that. But whether you have a parent that encourages you in that or not, as a married couple, as a young married couple, you have to figure out what a good relationship and what good child raising looks like for you. And you have to do that, and a lot of that means sifting through the way that you were raised and the relationship that you saw with your parents and figuring out how to do better. That's also true when it comes to like raising our kids, not just because of our family history, but also because of the religious pressure that we put on each other. Kids should be a certain way. That was a big religious theme when I was growing up in the evangelical church. We had Dr. James Dobson, Focus on the Family, writing all kinds of books about how to break a child's spirit so that they would rely on you and not be rebellious, and how to raise a kid so they won't wander away from the Lord's path when they got older. And there was all this religious pressure put on parents to do things exactly right so that their kids would come out perfect. And then when your kid's a teenager and he's got a bad attitude, a lot of these families didn't know how to adapt to that because they had followed a formula that ended up not working for them in the end, and they didn't know how to roll with the punches because they had all of this religious pressure on them about what their kids were supposed to be like and what it meant to raise kids. And it's good, man. Take all the advice that you can get from other people about raising kids, but at the end of the day, you're responsible for raising your own kids. And your parents aren't raising your kids, and your church is not raising your kids. You're raising your kids. And at some point, we have to stand up and say, I'm responsible for this. And that means that I need to know my children, who they are as people, and I need to raise them in the way that's best for them, because every kid is different. And that kind of freedom and that kind of lightness is hard for a lot of people to get to when there's all this social pressure. When it comes to our relationships with difficult people, we have to be really clear-minded about where that line is, where we're just enabling somebody or we're putting in so much emotional energy into somebody's life and they're feeding off of us, but there's not actually any growth happening. Because we might have this burden in our minds like, oh man, this person needs me. Or I need to be a good person. I need to help this other person out. And a lot of times we just keep adding energy to a dysfunctional relationship without ever feeling free enough to cut it off. And for whatever reason. But we need to be self-aware enough to know that some relationships are dead ends, at least the way that they're structured. And we need to do things to shake those relationships up so that new growth can happen and also so that we can be free to be who God called us to be. When it comes to your career and your future, it's the same thing. Maybe every day since you were born, your mom whispered in your ear that she wanted you to be an astronaut. And maybe you hit age 21 and you're too tall and your eyesight's not good enough to be in the Air Force, and so you're not ever going to be an astronaut. Or maybe your goal for yourself is you're going to be a rock star. Do you young people still want to be rock stars? I said young people, that's gross. Do you guys still want to be, is that still a dream that people have, to be rock stars? Yeah, when me and Gerardo were young, that was like, rock star was like, you couldn't do better than that. Top tier, rock star. Like, not even astronauts, right? No, rock star. Yeah. I don't see that so much anymore. What's that? Influencer? That's ridiculous. Yeah, YouTuber. It's influencer. Yeah. I'd still rather be a rock star. But there comes a certain point in our life where, like, you start to realize the thing that you wanted to do is not what you thought that it was. And you might not even be able to do it because the opportunity and the skill and all the things that go into it are not there. And the fastest path to bitterness is to just hang on to those things and say, I'm not going to be happy because I didn't fulfill my dream. Do you really want your dreams to have that much control over your life that they keep you from being happy forever until you die because you couldn't fulfill them? It's just a dream. Who's in charge at that point? You or the dream? We have to figure out how to be happy. We have to figure out how to be content and how to be joyful and how to be who we were made to be. Even if we had a mistaken idea of what that was at a certain point, and even if it's tough to let that go. And I know a lot of people that struggle with that. And the people I know who are most content are the people who are able to say, well, maybe that wasn't what I was supposed to do. I gave it my best effort and it didn't work out. So now, let me figure out something else that I like and I'm going to apply my effort there. Those people usually end up a lot happier than people who chase a dream to death and it's never fulfilled. When it comes to like our faith and our spirituality, a lot of us, the burdens that we carry when we go to God, it's like, oh man, I've been such a horrible sinner. Or I haven't read my Bible the way that I was supposed to read it for the last month. So what, I'm going to go to God and now I'm going to pray and God's going to be like, where were you for the last few weeks? And it's like, oh man, I guess I won't. You know what I mean? And that burden of like, I'm not who I think I should be when it comes to my relationship with God, that actually keeps us from building the relationship with God that we need to have, that we want to have, that God invites us to have. And so at some point, every time you sit down to pray, every time you sit down to read your Bible, every time you sit down to meditate, you got to start fresh and just say, you know what? Yesterday was yesterday. Whether I prayed well yesterday or whether I sinned yesterday or whether I read my Bible yesterday, doesn't matter. I'm going to do what I know I need to do today. We're going to start fresh. We're going to keep it light. We're going to travel light. God promises me that if I confess my sins, he'll forgive my sins. So why don't I just bank on that promise and do today what I know I need to do today, and we'll let tomorrow take care of itself. And when it comes to our church, when it comes to our relationship with each other, Jesus' command for what we're supposed to do is actually pretty simple. Matthew chapter 28, right at the end of the book, Jesus gives the Grand Commission or the Great Commission to his disciples. And he says, go into all the world and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to do everything that I have taught you. It's a pretty simple command. I think it's pretty clear. We need to teach people what Jesus taught. We need to teach each other how to obey what Jesus taught. We need to support each other as we learn how to obey what Jesus taught. And we have to ask ourselves, how much infrastructure and how much money and how many committees and how much of a building do we actually need to go and to teach each other and the people around us through our example and through our words and all that, what Jesus taught us to do? It's not much. How deep of an understanding of Scripture do you need to obey Jesus' commands? You need some, but it's not much. You don't need a seminary degree to do what Jesus told you to do. So let's leave that there for now. I just want you to ask yourself, and I want you to think, where are the burdens in your life that are holding you back? What are the patterns of thought that you've inherited from other people that are making you miserable and that are keeping you from doing what you know you need to do? What are the goals for yourself that are keeping you from being happy until those goals are fulfilled? What are the things that you need to accomplish in order to feel successful? What kind of pressure are you under? What kind of guilt? And how did those things affect your relationships and your sense of who you are and your relationship with God and the way that you move through the world? When you think about those things, all those things that you think are conditions for your happiness, when you think about those things, I want you to think and I want you to hear Jesus' invitation to you, God's invitation to you, to travel light. You don't need a week to let your bread rise. Bake some bread, flat bread, let's go. That's the story of the Exodus. It's time. The plagues are fulfilled. Let's get out of here. While Pharaoh's not looking, let's go. What Jesus told his disciples. You don't need extra shoes, extra coat, walking stick, all kinds of money. Thank you, Marshall. You don't need all that stuff. The invitation is there to travel light. But you have to be aware of the burdens that are holding you back. You have to give yourself permission to let those things go. And if you need permission to let your burdens go, come talk to us. We'll help you through that. You have to trust that you really do know what the right thing is to do, and that God will help you do it if you just start to do it. What's the fourth one? Oh yeah, you have to keep your objective clear. You need to know where you're going so that we don't let other people pile their objectives and their pressure onto us. Most of the things that we need to do in life, most of the things that we want to do are not hard. They don't cost a lot of money. And you don't need permission. And you don't need to earn them. You can just do them right now. When we talk about traveling light, that's what we're talking about. So let's travel light. Let's do it together. Let's help each other recognize those burdens in each other and drop them and let them go, whether it's a relationship or an idea or a goal, whatever it is that's keeping you from really enjoying your life and being who God made you to be. Figure out what it is and let it go.